All right, welcome to part two, where we're going to start diving into the actual rules portion of the Gray Knights. Again, this isn't a competitive video. We're not a competitive channel here. Definitely lots of channels better suited to that. I've shouted some out in the past: Aspect Tactics, GMG, the people who do 40K in 40 minutes. They're fantastic too. They're great. So if you are interested in the competitive side of 40K, highly recommend you go ahead and check these people out. Give them your support. Give them a follow. They will definitely teach you how to play the army effectively. What our channel is going to talk a little bit about is the narrative and how it translates into the rules that they've got here. So, Combat Patrol Box. So I did want to actually shout this out. I think the Gray Knights have one of the best Combat Patrol boxes that have been released, and here's the reason why. The Gray Knights really have quite a few units, but there's only so many kits that the Gray Knights contain. You have your standard Terminator kit, you have your standard Strike Squad kit, you have the Dread Knight, the Nemesis Dread Knight, and then you have whatever characters you want. Now, the thing about it is your standard kit here, these 5 guys in the back. That kit, I think, makes 4 different units. It makes the troop version, there's a fast attack version, the elite, the heavy, then you got your Terminators that make a couple of different things. So whenever you buy this Get Started, or even if you have the Hexfire box and you got the Get Started, you can use everything in here for something at some point. Like, even if you have all your troop choices, if you buy this box, you just turn the 5 Strike Squad people into maybe 5 Purifiers, or whatever the fast attack version is. Whatever you need to fill out your army, you can use. The Nemesis Dread Knight, you always need 3, and if you have 3, go ahead and make the Grandmaster Dread Knight, because that one's even better. You can always use more Terminators. And then obviously there's a character in there, which the character is the character. In this case, I believe you get a Librarian. In the Hexfire box, you got Crow. So overall, if you bought the Hexfire box and you're looking to expand your army, go ahead and just get the Combat Patrol box. You're going to want another Dread Knight. I assure you that's what you want. You need another 5 guys, which you can turn into whatever you want. You don't have the Terminators in the Hexfire box, so now you've got Terminators. And you need a second HQ, so you got Crow, and now you have a Librarian. You can just kind of convert one up into a Grandmaster, or you can buy a Grandmaster. I would definitely recommend for the Combat Patrol, if you bought the Hexfire box, buy the Combat Patrol. I can't really make that recommendation for the Thousand Suns. In fact, what I will say for the Thousand Suns, for the Hexfire box, if you can find the previous version of the Get Started box, which contains Armon in it, because you get Armon, and Armon is pretty much a staple of the Thousand Suns, plus he's Armon. Narratively, I can't not recommend playing Armon. I actually recommend getting that version of the Get Started box instead of the 9th edition version. I think it's also a little more cost effective. You're going to want Armon. He's such a fun character to play. And it's just a little bit better designed, in my opinion. So, my 2 cents on that. Talk a little bit about the detachment abilities for the Gray Knights here. Obviously, you get the Brotherhood of Psychers. So everyone in the Gray Knights is a Psycher, much like the Thousand Suns. If you have a 5-man Strike Squad, that 5-man Strike Squad does count as a Psycher. They do get a Psychic power. They can cast spells. They can deny. So that's definitely great. Obviously, troops, you get the usual objective secured ability. That's pretty standard. You do get Aegis. The Aegis is the armor worn by the Gray Knights is inscribed with hexagrammic wards. In conjunction with the purity of spirit and psychic might of the wearers, they can resist otherworldly attacks. And what that represents in the rules is that mortal wounds on a 5+, they essentially get a 5+, feel no pain against mortal wounds, which makes sense because a large chunk of mortal wounds are coming from psychic type attacks. But it also does apply to non-psychic attacks as well, like the Orc's impact hits on the charge, or just various effects that different armies can get that deal mortal wounds. They also get the 5+, feel no pain on that as well. So that's actually really nice. Normally you get no save, so any save is better than no save. The other interesting one is that if the unit is a Psyker, it adds 1 to deny the Witch test taken for this unit, which is the opposite of the Thousand Suns, which I might have forgot to mention to say in that review, is that the Thousand Suns get +1 to cast, and the Gray Knights get +1 to deny. So they kind of counterbalance the Thousand Suns, which is why they got released at the same time. But it's very thematic in my opinion, because the Gray Knights are more about defending the Imperium from heretic psychers and the rampant use of these kinds of vile powers, whereas the Thousand Suns are all about spreading, their psychic will on others. Beneath armored tread shall we crush them. From the skies we will dominate them. No matter their number, no matter where they fester, we will find them and we will annihilate them. The First Brotherhood are experts in armored assaults and in coordinating the strikes of several elements to completely destroy prioritized targets. The Brotherhood's epithet reflects both the blades of its warriors and its squadrons of tanks and gunships to slash at the enemy's heart, sheathed in sigil-inscribed armor plating. So this is basically your vehicle-heavy list. Yeah, all their abilities and effects and stratagems. Unlike the Thousand Suns, they got a little bit different here. So they get a stratagem, a psychic power, and a warlord trait. There are no walls we cannot breach, no havens where the foul spawn of the warp can cower, safe from our fury. Where'er evil resides, we shall seek it out, and deliver unto it the Emperor's justice. Blades of Victory. The swiftest destruction of abomination ensures neither they nor any witnesses can escape, and the Second Brotherhood have perfected tactics not only of hard and fast strikes, but also of rapid redeployment. Caught by both the speed and strength of their strikes from multiple attack angles, their enemies have no chance to avoid the Emperor's retribution. As you can probably gather, this one deals with a lot of redeployment tricks and a lot of high mobility. Definitely in the 9th edition, very effective to have that kind of abilities. We are the warriors of the Gray Knights, armored in faith, shielded by devotion, and armed with purity and purpose. But greater even than these, we carry the light of the divine Emperor of man into the dark places to purge the demonic wherever it may be found. Possessed of a wide array of psychic knowledge, the Third Brotherhood are as adaptable in the ritual disciplines as in their martial skills. Few have the power to undo their potent psychic projections. Even enemies fighting under fell influences find their master's protection torn aside, their frailties uncovered by those for whom there is no secrets. So it looks like they have a little bit of mix of flexibility, but they can also turn off people's power, like aura effects. The demon thinks itself clever. The demon thinks itself swift. It believes it can outwit us, outmaneuver us, and outdo us using every manner of trick and ploy. It is wrong. Our minds see past it all. Our minds see its plans and its weaknesses. We shall be its undoing. The Battle Brothers of the Fourth Brotherhood operate one step ahead of their enemies, instinctively channeling their martial and psychic skills to forge uncanny victories time after time. The prescient brethren have honed these skills over millennia, crafting temporal strategies that allow them to lie in wait for the enemy and avoid their clumsy traps in turn. Alright, I'm going to call you out here, Gray Knights. This sounds real suspiciously like the Thousand Suns Prescience type abilities, which you claimed were heretical and warp tainted, but it seems like you are using similar effects worded a little differently. I understand that the wording is key, but it's a little janky of you there, Gray Knights. I'm gonna point this out. We are sworn to fight for the Emperor unto death. By our means do our brothers fight even beyond death, for such is not a barrier to immortal duty. We are sworn to never waver in our task, nor cease our wars. By what we preserve do we ensure we will stand against the demon forever. Preservers, often fighting alongside many of the chapter's most ancient and revered warriors, the Fifth Brotherhood have perfected tactics around imposing and inspiring presence of dreadnoughts. The Preservers not only safeguard the knowledge and technology dreadnoughts represent, they will also lay down their lives to deny any threats to their honor. You could probably guess what this list does. It probably does extremely well. No task is more vital than the ending of the demon. No foe threatens the Emperor's realm more. It is a mission over which no life is more important. Should it cost billions to banish but one such monster, it is a price we pay gladly, for billions more shall continue to serve as a result. Masters of achieving victories against overwhelming forces with the precise application of sanctified power, the Sixth Brotherhood quickly identifies the fulcrum upon which the enemy's power hinges: speed, and the overpowering application of strength at the right point in time and space can topple the most far-reaching of demonic schemes. This one kind of represents that Armageddon war that we talked about earlier, where no planet or system or individual is more important than the duty that they were tasked for. And they wholeheartedly believe it. That's also why they're basically uncorruptible, is because they believe it with every fiber of their being. We do not stand alone. Though none can stand against the powers of the Empyrean as we can, others serve as our eyes and ears. We pay them heed so we can make the demon pay for every incursion, every infiltration, and every invasion. Extractors, specialists in mutually supportive tactics, the Seventh Brotherhood ensures no element of their force is wasted or isolated. From coordinated strikes alongside Imperial elements supplied by the Ordo Malleus to the iron-hard bonds between their battle brothers, the Extractors face the demonic threat as inspiring guardians of humanity. To us is entrusted the future. Upon our shoulders the burden of ensuring the strength and skill of the chapter rests. Perfection is our one and only standard. In every manner of war, we must be sublime, for the demon's artifice is infinite, and we face it down wherever it rears its head. Silver Blades. The Eighth Brotherhood are exemplars of studied excellence and versatile tactics. Their resilient and adaptive strategies ensure they can respond swiftly to the forensic and illogical machinations of their demonic adversaries. Their extensive training beyond that of other brotherhoods allows them to undertake rapid changes in doctrine. That's a little Slaneshi of you there. A little Emperor Children-like. Yeah, martial perfection. I think the Emperor's Children might appreciate that. Alright, so this is actually a little bit of a different one also. So whereas the other, like the Space Marines, for example, have the upgrades to characters, the Thousand Suns you also saw in our previous thing had where different types of sorcerers could take different upgrades. The Gray Knights one have a pretty unique spin on this, which I actually think is probably one of the most flavorful ones that I've seen so far. So the way that the Gray Knights upgrades work is that they can be given to characters or core units, which is the big one. I think this is the first one that a core unit can get one of these upgrades. To add power or points, you pay for them. It also looks like, because of the way this is, that they have to be unique, but multiple core units, for example, if you have 2 different core strike squads, they can each take a different upgrade. And there's 2 types. There's the visions and there's the gifts. Mechanically, they work the same, but fluff-wise, obviously, they're narratively different. So the visions, what it is the Psychers of the Gray Knights have a vision, not at all witchcraft, and they pass this knowledge on to either the character or the core unit, and they bestow upon them essentially a once per game effect, and that represents that vision kind of coming to fruition. For example, you can improve your Overwatch. Once a game, when you're firing Overwatch, you can hit on unmodified rolls of 4+, or various different effects. So like that represents the vision foresaw this moment, and they were ready for it, so they get the improved effects of it. And it gives a whole bunch of like I said, once per game effects. This is actually very cool. It's very cool because core units can take them also. And on the other side, you have the Gifts of the Prescient. Again, mechanically, these work the same. A lot of them are once per game effects. Some of them are, at the start of the game, which is essentially a once per game effect. And you can trigger them. But essentially what this represents narratively is they saw a vision, and rather than passing on knowledge, they passed on an artifact that was crafted to aid them in one specific moment. And when that moment comes, the bearer will recognize it and be able to activate the artifact, which will aid them in that moment. Again, a little witchcrafty of you, Gray Knights, but narratively it's a very cool translation of mechanics into rules. Kudos to you, Games Workshop. I think this is one of the best implementations of the upgrade system in 9th edition so far. So I am super looking forward to seeing what else you guys come up with. Whether or not this is going to be exclusive to the Gray Knights or other people will get it, to be seen, but the fact that you're trying new things gives me a lot of to look forward to. You've got this pretty great artwork piece here, actually. This is some good stuff. With that said, Games Workshop, I'm waiting for that new Drago model. Drago is still a fine cast model. You can't buy him in plastic. I'm waiting for it. Obviously, you got new stratagems all around. Lots of great ones. I'm not going to go through each one. It's too much, but they're good. I'm not going to lie. One thing that I do want to talk about as I page through this section here. So if you're brand new to Gray Knights, what I recommend doing is reading all of these stratagems, right? You're going to want to read them all, see what your options are. The first thing you're going to want to do is find the ones that apply to the units you're playing, right? So don't start with a 2,000 point game. Start with a smaller game, right? Like Combat Patrol. And a lot of the stratagems are specific to a unit, right? So for example, if you're not taking Paladins, you can take out all the stratagems that have Paladin, right? You don't need those anymore. So don't worry about them. So find the ones that are relevant to your army. From there, pick like three or four that you want to try to use in a game, right? You're not playing optimally yet. It's like your first or second game, or even your third or fourth game. You're nowhere close to playing this army optimally, so don't worry about it, right? Just pick a couple stratagems that you want to try to remember to use in the game and try it out. And then that game, only focus on those stratagems. Just make sure you play them when that moment comes up and see how you like them. Be like, oh, was this a good use of my command points, or was it not a good use of your command points? Whatever you do, try to avoid wasting the command points on the reroll. Unless it's going to save a character or really make or break something. Just trust me, command point rerolls are not the best use of them, especially because they can fail. You've seen that on this channel lots of times. So that's my recommendation for brand new people coming into the game. When you see like these 20 stratagems, just know you don't need them all. Relics, same thing. Just pick a relic. Try it. Like, there's no harm. Honestly, in my opinion, until you get to a very high level of the game, your choice of relic is not going to be the thing that makes or breaks you winning the game. Just trust me on that one. You're going to make way more mistakes that are way more detrimental to your overall gameplay than what relic you picked. So don't worry about it. Pick the one that you think is cool. Next game, pick a different one. Always try something new, right? Try out different things. That's part of the fun of the hobby when you're playing it, is keeping it fresh, keeping it new, trying out different things. Even if a relic seems suboptimal, think to yourself, like, use your brain. Think, is there a way that I can make this optimal? Psychic powers. This one is also actually fairly interesting. This one is new. I follow the psychic powers a lot since I'm a Thousand Suns fan. They have two psychic tables, but they're slightly different. The Dominus Discipline that you see on the left there, that psychic table represents your standard psychic table that everyone gets. Your psychics can choose powers from the Dominus Discipline. You cast it once per turn. Can't double up on them. You're fine. The Sanctus Discipline is a little different. Because every unit in the Gray Knights is a Psyker, some units specifically have a psychic power pre-assigned to them. Hammerhand on the Terminators is a perfect example. Now, what happens if you have two units of Terminators? Obviously, they're both assigned Hammerhand already. Well, the way Sanctic works is any power on the Sanctic Discipline can be doubled up on. You can cast it more than once, even if you pass or fail. It doesn't matter. So, for example, two units of Terminators, both of them can cast Hammerhand. For each subsequent casting of a power, like the second time you cast Hammerhand, you add +1 to the cast. So if you cast it a third time, like you have 3 units of Terminators, you add +2 to the cast, to the casting target value. So it becomes more difficult to cast as you kind of, flood the area with similar psychic energy. But you can still do it, and they're pretty cost effective. Like Hammerhand is 5. So the second time it's 6, which you can still get off pretty reasonably. 7's a little harder, right? You need average dice still, though. So math is still on your side. Do be aware if you're playing against a Gray Knight player. I don't want to call people out like they're cheating, but people can make this mistakes. I misread this on the first thing. You cannot do this effect on the Dominus Discipline. Right, so if you see someone casting Gate of Infinity twice, or you see someone casting Sanctuary twice, you can't do that. That's not how it works. The Psychic Conflux, where you can recast psychic powers, only applies to the Sanctic Discipline. So if you're watching this video, it's Astral Aim, Purge Soul, Hammer Hand, Purifying Flame, Armor Resilience, and Ethereal Castigation. Those are the spells that can be doubled up on. Gate of Infinity, Empiric Amplification, Sanctuary, Vortex of Doom, Warp Shaping, and Ghostly Bonds can only be cast once. The ones that you will probably see on accident, and again, I'm going to give people the benefit of the doubt, this is on accident. Gate of Infinity is incredibly powerful, Sanctuary is incredibly powerful, and Warp Shaping, if they fail to cast it on the first try, they might, mistakenly think they can cast it again, right? No, you're not allowed to do that. So, just a rules pointing out here. Again, for people who don't play Gray Knights, obviously you wouldn't know this, but I'm just trying to help you out. Something to be aware about. Litanies. Your chaplain. You have a chaplain. Chaplain gets litanies. This should come as no surprise to anybody. For those who are new to the game, chaplains are, chaplains. They preach. They give you rousing speeches. Your chaplain can give this rousing speech and get different effects. Warlord traits is pretty straightforward. You all know how this works. Named characters also get pre-assigned a warlord trait. An interesting one to note. Voldus has a warlord trait called Lore Master, which is on page 48. Entirely separate warlord trait. He has a unique warlord trait. This is actually very cool. I do hope that more named characters get unique warlord traits in the future. So, good on you, Games Workshop, for remembering that you can do things like that. Alright, chapter approved rules. Let's slide this one over here, actually. So again, like when you're playing the match play rules, you get secondaries, and the secondaries that come in the books are typically made so that way you can play your army in a narrative way in a competitive format. So, purge the enemy, destroy the demon. The Gray Knights were created for a sacred and singular duty, the destruction of the demonic in all its forms. From the insidious to the monstrous, all must fall before the sons of Titan. Obviously, you get benefits from murdering demons. Very thematic, 10 out of 10. No mercy, no respite. Teleport assault. This is a progressive objective. The Gray Knights' empiric defenses ward them against the chill touch of the warp. Emerging from the arachnic glare of teleportation, they crush their foes in a sudden hammer blow of fury before the enemy has any chance to strike back. So this one kind of like with their Alpha Strike kind of mentality, gives you a benefit for killing things out of Deep Strike. Again, very cool, very thematic. Do you use it all the time? Maybe, maybe not, depending on how your army is set up, but narratively very cool. Warpcraft, Purifying Ritual. The corruption seething over this vital area cannot be allowed to weaken the barriers holding back the warp. It must be ritually purified, one psychic node at a time. So it has been foreseen. This one's kind of interesting. So when you're purifying, you purify objectives, and the more successful objectives you purify in a turn, the more points you get. So if you purify one objective, you get 1, 2, you get 2, but 3, you get 4, and 4 or more, you get 6. You do have to burn your psychic action, but it's not like it lasts, you burn your whole turn like some other objectives. And you get 6, you can potentially get 6, and you can do this every single turn, which is the interesting thing on this one. So you can't purify the same objective twice in the same turn, but you can purify the same objective next turn. So if you can control multiple objectives for multiple turns, you can keep purifying them and keep racking up points. So that's an interesting one. It's a very interesting one, especially since all Gray Knights are Psychers. So all units should be able to perform this ritual. And you get a nifty name generator. Maybe we'll do this also. We'll do this when we play the game. Again, Crusade Rules. We're going to do an entire video on Crusade Rules and my thoughts on, starting up a Gray Knight Crusade and building a Crusade list and talking about all these agendas and things like that. There's a whole section just for Crusade. But in the meantime, just know that that exists. Oh, here's an interesting one that I do want to touch on here is the Liber Demonica. So on all the Gray Knight models, you can see like there's a book on their chest or a book somewhere on their person. That is the Liber Demonica. What that is a actual book inscribed with the prayers of the Gray Knights. And the part that I particularly like about it is the book itself is bound to the spine. The spine of the book is carved from the thigh bone of a martyred saint. Specifically, that is what the book is made of. It's silvered pages bound to the thigh bone of a martyred saint that's inscribed with like holy passages. And the only thing that I took out of reading that whole section is thick thighs save lives. This right side here, you get some titles. That's very cool. You can earn titles for your Gray Knight commanders. Unique relics, lots of fun relics. Battle traits are the upgrades you get for successfully winning battles or just not dying. Psychic fortitudes, other things that you can earn just from playing the Crusade faction. These are all unique abilities, not match play in the least, but definitely a lot of flavor, a lot of fun. And this is actually a very interesting one also, Demonic Nemesis. When you do a Crusade, you can create a whole demonic nemesis, like a literal model. You can make your own model, whatever size you want. You can go anywhere from a Master of Possession all the way up to the Lord of Change, the greater demons. So whatever you want to make your demonic entity that you're hunting, and there's a way to play a whole narrative about hunting your nemesis up to banishing your nemesis. And even if you're not playing against a demon army, there's rules in here to give this model. So you make your own model, right? And you can give it to your opponent, and they get a free demon that represents your demonic nemesis. But you also get some things out of it as well. So it's a very cool way to play and ensure that, even if you're not playing against demon forces, there's a way to continue your narrative of hunting this demon down. Fantastic picture of a Crusade army. One thing I will say, Games Workshop, is this is the same model. I stared at this picture way too long, and you just copy-pasted this model into the same picture. So, don't think I didn't notice that, Games Workshop. And we get into the data sheets here, right? This is pretty much your standard rules. You get initial no fear. You get bolter disciplines. You can combat squad them. Standard Space Marine stuff. Not gonna go over it. If you guys don't know, you'll play a Space Marine army eventually, and you'll figure it out. This Masters of the Warp. This is something that was added in Psychic Awakening. Very cool. I really like this mechanic. So whereas the Space Marines have their doctrines, like where they automatically progress through their method of war, and the AdMech have the Canticles, the Necrons have their dynastic codes, where they kind of have to pre-plan them, like a computer, you program them in and then they run their course. The Gray Knights have a lot more flexibility to represent their eliteness, as well as it has a touch of the psychicness into it. So the way this works is you pick a tide at the start of the game, and that's what you get. And you stay in that tide as long as you want. You don't have to change out of the tide. But if you do want to change, there is a psychic power that you can cast, which is the Warp Shaping Psychic Power. It casts on a 4. It's incredibly easy to cast. If you fail it, however, you don't get to change the tide, and you don't get to cast it again until the next turn. But you can then cast it upon success. You can change the tide to whatever you want. So let's say you start in Tide of Convergence. Halfway through the game, you want a little more movement. You cast a spell. You switch to Tide of Celerity. Let's say you get to the last turn of the game and you need a little bit, extra on your weapons. You can cast it again and go back to the Tide of Convergence. There's nothing locking you in or out of ability. So this is very cool because it gives the Gray Knights a lot of flexibility, whereas being a little bit more locked in like some of the other factions do. I very much like this, and I think it's very cool that it's tied to the psychic powers, which is very flavorful. And here we go, just into your standard data sheets. Drago, this little narrative fluff down here at the bottom, I very much enjoyed reading that. It's basically recounting the tales of various brothers of the Gray Knights in their memory of the mysterious silver warrior who appeared from nowhere, beat the shit out of a bunch of demons, and then disappeared back into the warp afterwards. AKA the demon for the Emperor. Grandmaster in Nemesis Dread Knight. Don't know why you wouldn't take it, honestly. It's real good. It's real good. As a note, much like a lot of the other factions, there's limiting things. Like you can only have one Grandmaster. So if you have a Grandmaster, you cannot take a Grandmaster in Nemesis. Vice versa, if you have the Grandmaster in Nemesis, you can't take a second Grandmaster unless it's in a different detachment. Obviously, there's only one Grandmaster per Brotherhood. That's kind of narrative. That's how it works. Stern is a brother captain. So, only one brother captain per detachment, because the detachment essentially represents the factions of a Brotherhood. So there's only one Grandmaster, there's one brother captain. If you take a second detachment, then you can take another one, right? Also, you can't double up. Like, you can't make two detachments that are the first Brotherhood and make two Grandmasters from the first Brotherhood, right? Narratively, that doesn't make sense, and that is actually represented in the rules. So, good on you, Games Workshop. You have Tech Marines, you have Chaplains. Here's a Terminator squad, and much like I was talking about earlier, down here in the Psyker for the unit, it specifically will state that it knows Smite and Hammerhand from the Sanctic Discipline. So when it's assigned to a unit like this, it will come from the Sanctic Discipline, because it then gives you the ability to cast it more than once if you have two Terminator squads, for example. Or, for example, the Strike Squad also has Hammerhand, right? So if you have a Strike Squad and a Terminator Squad, you don't have to choose who gets Hammerhand. They can both cast it, increasing difficulty after the first one. As I mentioned, all of the regular Marine units, like the Paladin Squad, the Purifier Squad, that's all the same kit. So if you think to yourself, like, oh man, I've already got, 5 Strike Squad. I've got enough Strike Squad. Why do I want to buy more Strike Squad? Well, it's because that Strike Squad also makes your Paladins and your Purifiers. So, there's no reason not to buy these Get Started boxes. They're fantastic deals. So just know that it's not a waste for you, Gray Knights. Lucky you. Dread Knights? Or Dreadnoughts? This is the Dreadnoughts. There's the Inceptor Squad and the Purgatation Squad. Again, they look real familiar because that's the same kit. Just one's fast attack and one's heavy support. They pretty much fulfill their roles. And the regular Nemesis Dread Knight, like I said, you're going to use more than one. Just there's no reason not to have more than one. They're great. They've got all access to the vehicles, right? The regular Land Raider, the Crusader, the Redeemer. So all 3 Land Raider variants. So don't worry about that. Good old-fashioned Rhino and Razorback. One thing I did not see in here were things like Predators or Vindicators. So no Predators for you. I guess that would go on your Dreadnoughts, I suppose. Do get the Flyers, though. The Interceptor, Storm Talon, Storm Raven, big old transport version. Talks about the weapon profiles. Force weapons. Here's one that I actually didn't get around to talking about. So back in the day, I wanted to go ahead and throw a little bit back on the old lore also. Back in the day with force weapons, GW has experimented with force weapon rules all over the place. There was an edition, for example, where if you wounded a character with a force weapon, you could take a psychic test, and if you pass, it would auto-slay the character. Broken as all hell. Like, it was ridiculous. Like, Demon Prince, 1 wound, pass psychic test, dead. Like, literally dead. Kill your Demon Prince. Or, like, just anything. Like, it murdered everything and anything. It was so broken. It was so good. They were obviously pretty rare, but then the Gray Knights rolled around and everyone was rocking force weapons. And you can probably, I think that was part of why like that Drago Wing 11 model army was so good. I think it was around that time where force weapons just had incredibly powerful rules that allowed them to just decimate, anything. Like there was a time I think where you couldn't take saves against force weapons. Or in early editions, the way saves worked was if you had, for example, AP2. Let's say you had an AP2 weapon. If the AP was better than the armor save, so like Marines had armor 3+, right? And you had an AP2 weapon, it basically meant that you couldn't take saves, right? So if you had an AP4 weapon and you had a unit that had a 5-up save, you couldn't get the 5-up save. But if you had a 3-up save, you got your 3-up save, right? It was an all or nothing system. So force weapons used to also, I think there was a period of time where you couldn't save against them, or and you also couldn't invuln save them, making them ludicrously effective weapons. GW has tried all sorts of different things. Whereas in the current edition, force weapon is more just it's a weapon type. It's got, a slightly better profile. Not as ridiculous. I will say flavor-wise, the old rules were much more flavorful. But playing them on the tabletop, I don't miss ridiculous rules. I understand, having played this game for a while, that there is a balancing act. As funny as sometimes ridiculous rules are, they're not fun when you run into them, especially if you can run into them in a way that's extremely abusable, like your whole army is equipped with force weapons. That nobody wants to play against that when they auto-kill all your models. It's just not interesting, So I think this edition of the game is the best balance, and they're putting the flavorful rules in the right places in the form of the stratagems, where they're not every single turn, but they're there, and you use them strategically and effectively, and there are a lot of very flavorful choices that are being made, and I think that's more interesting than just getting to use a flavor all the time. Is having that aspect of choice. It makes you feel like you're more in control of your army, and it makes you feel like your army is more personally tailored to you. It's the choices that you make as you're leading your army. Whereas maybe in some older editions, in some older editions, I would say that GW fell prey to the idea that, you didn't really make choices. It was just an autopilot. You just did what you did. You don't have to think about it. And sometimes it got stale. Like some armies in particular, Blood Angel, Rhino Rush, Khorne Berserker, jumping from combat to combat. Well, yeah, it was fun to a point. It also got very tedious and very stale very quickly. There you go. Closing out here with this beautiful piece of art. So, again, thank you for checking out this 2-part video. I hope you enjoyed the Gray Knight Codex. I hope you enjoyed the Gray Knight Codex. I enjoyed talking about it, and actually, I enjoyed getting the chance to sit down and read the Codex, and rather than just skimming the rules like sometimes I'm off to do. I'm moving on to the next Codex. So if you like this kind of content, hit me up. Let me know down in the comments. Definitely would appreciate a like and a subscribe. Or if you know a friend who loves this, please share the video with them so that they can see that we love the content as much as they do. If there's a codex that you would like me to do this for, let me know also in the comments. This one, shout out to the Salty Legion, was requested by that. So as you can see, we only got so many followers right now. So if you request something, I'll probably do it in a pretty fast time too. So once again, thank you everyone. Appreciate you hanging out, checking us out. Peace out, everybody.